FathomVerse. But first, before I get started, I just want to say that this has been a huge effort, not just of the MBARI team, but also the Monterey Bay Aquarium has been involved. Van Ranch, which is a game design studio based in the Netherlands, has also been really close collaborators. And then, of course, the funding support that we've received in order to do this, the National Science Foundation, Schmidt Marine Technology Partners, as well as MBARI. They've all been really helpful in getting this out the door. But really kind of taking a step back, the approach that we have with FathomVerse is largely inspired by the things that we know that work relatively well in the space world and like public engagement around space activities versus what are being used historically within the oceanographic or ocean communities. And there was a really great article, it was actually published in 2017, written by Dr. Jyotika Vermani. She is currently the director of Schmidt Ocean Institute, but formerly was a part of the X Prize Foundation. And so from her perspective as somebody, at the time working within the space world, but also an interest and later transition into the oceans, what she did was, evaluate the different approaches that were used in space versus the ocean when it comes to public engagement. And what she found, and I just highlight the main points here, is that in the ocean, we tend to have a pretty negative messaging tone. There's reasons for this, so I cannot fault us for doing this. But our narrative focuses tend to be really ideas based. Things are really politicized, which tends to actually reflect exactly the structure of our community, right? The fact that we've just got hundreds of NGOs or academic institutions or groups that are all pushing their own narrative, as opposed to, a focused, I guess, bullhorn like NASA or the Environmental Space or the European Space Agency. And then the outcomes tend to be really, doom and glooming. Again, not something I want to fault them for, but within space, we see something really different. And so what we're trying to do with FathomVerse is to adopt these approaches that work or have worked really well, where we will use a positive messaging tone. Our narrative focuses are more mission-based. So, the mission here is to discover all life in the ocean. We do this by searching for and identifying different animal groups, which are each a mission of their own right. We share messaging content around collective human achievement, the idea that we within this community are all working together to build knowledge and understanding of life in the ocean. And so that what that does is allow us to, put forth a unified and cross-promotional voice or community that is also really forward-looking. And so, as I said before, right, FathomVerse provides us with an opportunity to crowdsource annotations through gaming, so have a scientific impact, while also reaching a really broad community who wants to learn more about ocean life, wants to find out ways to contribute directly to ocean science, and want to be a part of this broader mission. And so the design pillars, the ideas that we've kind of built the whole game around was this idea that people can join us as we explore. We can create an experience so that while people are engaging with data, it's enjoyable. They can be blissfully productive as opposed to doom scrolling on social media. We also wanted to keep it really casual, right? The idea that you don't need a VR headset or console. You don't need to set aside significant chunks of time in order to make a meaningful contribution. You could be doing this within 5 minutes while waiting, in line at the bus or at the grocery store. And then the other two things is that we wanted to keep it real. There's no fake narrative. We're telling people that they're looking at real data generated by researchers and members of the community all over the world, and really just inviting everybody to join us on this inspiring and challenging mission of discovering all life in the ocean. And I just wanted to highlight, that we've been so grateful and the support that we've been getting with the community, even before we launched the game last year. We had data contributions from Schmidt Ocean Institute, NOAA's Office of Exploration and Research, Ocean Networks Canada, Ocean Observatories Initiative, which is affiliated with the National Science Foundation, Ocean Exploration Trust, and MBARI. And we have just entered into an agreement with National Geographic Society's Pristine Seas. And then Dawn Wright, as many of you know her as her Deepness, she's also contributing data from her Marianas Trench Dive, and we're making that all available to game players. And so this is the trailer.
This sound isn't on.
You can't hear the sound.
No.
I don't know. You can't hear it now. Sorry about that. I don't know how to use Google Slides really well, but thank you to Emily for putting that together for us. That went live. Now, how do I advance my slides, you guys? Here we go. All right, but while we just saw a beautiful rendition of the front end of the game, right? Like the actual interface that game players are playing, really fueling the entire FathomVerse system is, a game backend, but also a content management system, which you see here. These are the API description docs for using this content management system with the CMS. And what the CMS is doing, it's absolutely vital to the functioning of the game, but it also allows us to expand the capabilities of this game over time as new data contributions and needs from our community come in. And so the way this works is that data are coming from our contributors, either directly from contributors, and I'll explain how to do that, or within the FathomNet portal. And those data are unlabeled. So, this is raw video data or image data. You don't have any annotations associated with them. And, that's a batch of data that gets pushed into the CMS. But then the other thing that we have, right, is this FathomNet database. This is a data set with expertly annotated visual data. And so what the CMS does is it actually pulls data from both of these sources and then breaks up that data into what we called unlabeled play contexts, where this collection of images, the smaller subset of images, is then fed into the game and played by a game player as they conduct a number of different dives. And so the reason why I think this is really powerful is because game players, when they are diving in the game, they're looking at not only unlabeled data, but also labeled data. And it's that combination that allows us to evaluate how well they're playing. So once a game player is playing the game, they then label that play context. And then the CMS takes all of this information, aggregates it. But then the first thing it does is look, right, at how well the game player identified or labeled images compared to the expert labels, right, those green ones. And what we're able to do is then come up with a player reputation score that we then use to weight the different players' votes to generate consensus. And so that's all done within a consensus protocol, again, enabled by the content management system, that then generates these consensus labels or labeled data that we then push back to our contributors, but also to the FathomNet database. The other thing that game players are also doing within the game is labeling or flagging images that might have issues. And so this is something that's then raised to the attention of our team, and an expert will then go and review them. And then we've created a whole bunch of other resources and dashboards around the data that's flowing in and out of the game, so we can ensure that things are functioning properly, but also that we're communicating to game players around what our progress is, and then what is upcoming, and like what are some of the things that might require more focus. So for instance, we have a dashboard that are creating plots like this that shows the number of images, either with or without labels, that are currently live in the game. We share this with game players so that they know, what animal groups in blue require more focus. We create leaderboards where we can display game players from their device ID and like either their contribution points or their precision. Again, it just creates a motivating factor, I guess, for more play and more improvement. And then also, game players have a way to favorite images. And so we share with them which ones are the most favorited week after week. The other thing too, we've got the content management system, but we also have analytics dashboards that are telling us how well the front end is working. And so, these are data pulled from, I think, earlier last week. More than we've definitely exceeded 32,000 players. And then you can see, things like daily active users, monthly active users. And so all of this information we use to try and understand, how well is the game functioning? Are there differences or changes we should make around engagement and communicating what we're doing? And then one of the other more recent things we've created is a player report where game players now within the app can see how have they contributed to the game, either through their points, images that they looked at that they didn't have ID'd before, what animal groups are their missions certified. And the idea then being that because of the content management system, things can grow over time. We can increase the number of mission animals. Right now, I think we have just over 50 or maybe 60 mission animal groups, different awards that people can unlock. Also, those awards can be videos or images or, so think about these things as things we can add to over time and provide a mechanism for outreach and further engagement. And as we look to the future, this represents about a $1 million investment in effort. So it's not a small thing. But since we've launched, now looking at 33,000 players, 175 countries, 17 million annotations, we're almost at 100,000 previously unlabeled images that have reached consensus through the game. And just yesterday, we pushed those consensus labels to the FathomNet database. And we can take a look at those during my breakout later. More than 125 denizens of the deep, millions of images are ready to go. And of course, we're happy to take on more. And like I said, we launched the second version of the game about 2 weeks ago. And I just wanted to explain why I think it's useful or helpful to contribute to FathomVerse. Because for those of you who might have visual data without real plans for how to process it, you might not have a team in place, you might not have a way to host your data. This provides a mechanism for you. The idea that you could be generating high-level taxonomic annotations or morphological annotations from the valuable footage that you've already collected. And the way we can do this is you can actually submit that data directly to the FathomVerse team. And what we do is we run inference. So we run 2 different machine learning models. We generate observations, we create tracks for them, we select key frames, we host those frames on URLs, and then we review those images for appropriateness before pushing them to the game. The other thing that we're working on and will be implemented in the future is to also make curated submissions directly from the FathomNet portal. So the idea is that the FathomVerse and game players are, essentially a collaborator with all of us as we move forward and generating useful information. And we then make those consensus labels within the game then available to you, the contributor. But then what we also are doing is we're creating a collection of those images and consensus labels and pushing those also to the FathomNet database. So while you might be contributing unlabeled data to FathomVerse, you get not only annotations, but also a collection then shared with the rest of the FathomNet database. So it's kind of like a twofer. And then the other thing is that you can use FathomVerse for research. For research, but also outreach, where you can engage, you can provide content. We could work with you to figure out how do we perhaps talk about it and promote your contributions on social. Because we have more than 30,000 players, we can provide impact metrics. So like the number of players viewing your data, the number of labels, the number of views of your contributed content, all valuable things to think about when you're trying to measure outreach impact. And so Lily and Emily will walk us through that in a little more detail. And so then how do you contribute to FathomVerse? So the first thing is really just email us. So you let us know what your interest is, and then we can go back and forth with you to understand whether those data are appropriate for FathomVerse. And then what we ask people to do is to create a web accessible zip file that contains your media and or your frame level or collection level metadata. Or in some cases, you can also provide direct access for us to your data hosting repository. I know that's something that we've already set up with Schmidt Ocean Institute. Thank you, Kareem. And then you can, then number 3, fill out and submit a Darwin Core metadata form. And what this is right, this is information that, important metadata that will then accompany your submission and then be part of the collection that winds up going into FathomVerse. But there's also information in that Darwin Core around attribution, which is also used within the game. And then again, use FathomVerse for outreach. So please attend that breakout. And so with that, I'm happy to take any questions, or we might be out of time. I'm not sure.
We're perfectly at the time of our scheduled 10-minute break that we threatened to bleed into. So
Okay.
could probably answer a question or two.
Give me one.
There is an outstanding question in the chat, Kakani, from Alex that I imagine you're probably the best person to address.
Read it out to me. Oh, I got it. It's taking a taxonomic approach. Has there been any discussion of branching into functional traits and trait-based analysis? So Alex, that's actually a really good question. So FathomNet is actually taking a kind of a mixed approach. I think Brian answered that to some extent where, right now we're using like taxonomic keys that are readily available to us. So like, worms already exists. Of course, MBARI already has, like an easy to access API that we then incorporate into FathomNet database. But, the way we've built the database is we can accept all sorts of annotations, not just constrained to taxonomic ones. And so like, if Smarter ID had an easy to integrate, taxonomic key, we could be doing that. I know we've had discussions with groups in Australia around Katami to create, those linkages into FathomNet. I do want to say, at least within the game, we've also kind of removed that constraint in some cases. So while we do our best to make sure the animal groups have some very clear taxonomic link, there are some groups that do not. And so the way we've kind of subdivided these groups has been really informed by work of other individuals within the community, like Carrie Howell's team around the Smarter ID. And so we've not only incorporated taxonomy, but also kind of morphological traits. So that's why we're using things like sea fans as an animal group within FathomVerse. So I guess short answer is there's plenty of flexibility, but for it to really be incorporated into, let's say, the database, like having a taxonomic key or some sort of hierarchical key that we could access would be really important. Da, da, da. So where do I start? Working with sensitive video data like VME species indicators. Can you use FathomNet? I think I might need a little more details. So I'm aware of I think it's Amy Baca-Taylor's paper defining vulnerable marine ecosystems using, key species or key groups. Those include, corals, sponges. And so we actually have a vulnerable marine ecosystem object detector available in the FathomNet models, which Kevin, I'm sure will go over. And so in that case, those are kind of higher level groups, right? They're not species or genus level. This is more like the family level. And so, using those models could be fine or would be fine for your application. but I have a feeling that the sensitivity you have around this is perhaps the latitude and longitude of the observations. But maybe provide a little bit more detail. Um, Concerns about data privacy, so this depends. The data that are made available on FathomNet database, but also our models, they're meant to be publicly accessible, but used within some constraints. So from all of the data, the image data, it's it uses a Creative Commons license that has attribution, but are for non-commercial uses. We don't necessarily have embargo data or sensitive data that are made available on the database. But if you were to use, let's say, the portal, you have that option to, embargo data or make repositories public and private. And so you can choose which imagery you do want to share or make public, or what aspects of the metadata you want to share or make public. I hope that answered that question. Yes, coordinates. Okay, great, Carolina. And then Mary, all your photos of animals in the Northeast Pacific. So what you see in the database is what has been contributed to it. And I think, as I said before, because we're using like the worms taxonomy, what that means is, as data are contributed, they should be able to find a home, right, in the taxonomic key. And so this is our goal, right? If we want to be able to really create a data set that is representative of all ocean life, particularly having value to training models and taxonomic training. What we really need is more data. So I think one of our goals we set, maybe Kevin, you can correct me, is like 100 to 1,000 images per animal species found in the ocean. So we need more data, we need more observations, and we're happy to work with you to make that happen. And I think I know I answered one of your questions already. If anyone else has another question, happy to do that. Or give you your break time. So no one else. Alex, I'll answer your question. So yes, for FathomVerse, it's actually both. It's ocean engagement, but also is AI literacy. In fact, there is a lot of information that we're sharing within the app. For instance, unlockable awards, where people learn a little bit more about how AI is being used and how their gameplay is contributing to these data pipelines, but also improvement of the AI that we're using. It's very, very transparent, unlike a lot of AI being used broadly outside of our community, let's say. And so that was the point, right? We want to demystify what AI is, how it's used, what might your expectations be around its performance. And one of, I think, the things that's really incredible about this within FathomVerse is we have an opportunity to, post, this is what the AI looked like a year ago. This is what the AI is looking like now, thanks to your contributions. And so that they get, feedback on how well things are going. The newest mini game called Bound shows images, like whole scenes of images. And when they first look at those images, they'll actually see what the AI is proposing. And so very quickly, they get a sense of how well does the AI function on this image or data set, and where might they be improving it by adding new bounding boxes or fixing the bounding boxes that were proposed by the AI. So all of that is an important aspect of FathomVerse. Great, I think that's it. We have a little bit of time for a break.